Hello and welcome to A.G.Zone. In this video, we'll be discussing about absorption of digested product. As I have discussed in my previous videos the process of digestion, now let's talk about how digested food is absorbed. So, to begin with, absorption simply means the movement of digested products from intestinal mucosa to other parts of body. You can see here is the small intestine. This is the part responsible for the absorption of most of the digested products. The digested products move from intestine to blood vessels or limbs, and with the help of blood vessel and lymph, the digested material move to different part of the body. But how does food moves from intestinal mucosa to blood vessel or lymph? There are two main methods. These are called active and passive transport. Now let's see some basics about active and passive transport. Active and passive transport, as you may have already guessed, these are the mode of transport. In active transport, the products like glucose, amino acid, carrier ions like Na, these form of things are transferred. While in passive transport, some things are also common, like some kinds of glucose or amino acid are also carried out by passive transport. And moving further, there are some electrolytes like chloride ions, and yes, water is also transported by passive method, and monosaccharides are also transported by passive method of transport. Active and passive form of transport can also be known as simple diffusion. Passive form of transport can also be known as simple diffusion, and active form of transport is also called facilitated transport. Now let's move to the transport of water. Transport of water occurs in stomach, and it is a passive mode of transport. Passive because it does not require any energy and it simply uses osmosis. In osmosis, the water moves from low concentration to high concentration. Now, high concentration is the area where the density of salt is high, and low concentration is the reverse, means where the concentration is low. So, the water molecules will move from low concentration to high concentration to stabilize or equalize the solution. This transfer of water depends upon the osmotic gradient, that means it is passive transport. On the other hand, active transport occurs against the osmotic gradient and hence requires energy. Now once again let's move to the topic of transport. I have told you that various nutrients like amino acids, monosaccharides like glucose or electrolytes like Na are absorbed into the bloodstream by this mechanism. And in a similar manner, in passive transport, other things like water, etc., are absorbed. But there is one thing in common, that these all things are soluble. That means they can pass membrane by mixing up with water. But how the insoluble things can be transported? Now let's see that. Now, the things which cannot be transported by passive or facilitative mechanism are transported in the form of chylomicrons. Things which are insoluble like fatty acid or glycerol, which do not dissolve in water, cannot be absorbed in the bloodstream, so they are first incorporated into small droplets called micelles, moved into the intestinal mucosa, the innermost layer of the alimentary canal. In this intestinal mucosa, they are reformed into very small protein coated fat globules. These protein coated fat globules are called chylomicrons, which has a protein coat outside and flat globules inside. This is called chylomicron. Chylomicrons then enter into the intestinal mucosa, transported into the lymph vessels in the villi. These lymph vessels ultimately release the absorbed substances into the bloodstream. Now let's see absorption in various parts of alimentary canal. Starting with mouth. In mouth, certain drugs comes in contact with the mucosa of the mouth. As you can see here, this is the mucosa of mouth. Here below the tongue there is lining of capillaries which helps in absorption of certain drugs. Now let's move to our second stop, which is stomach. In stomach there is absorption of water, simple sugars, and alcohol, etc. takes place. These are all things which are absorbed in stomach. Food after stomach then goes to the small intestine. Maximum absorption occur in small intestine. Most of the things which are broken down into simpler forms are absorbed here, so it is also known as principal organ for absorption of nutrients. The digestion is complete here, and the final product of digestion, such as glucose, fructose, fatty acid, cholesterol, and amino acids, are absorbed through the mucosa into the bloodstream and lymph. Now let's move to our last organ where some sort of absorption takes place, that is large intestine. In large intestine, absorption of water, some minerals, and drugs takes place as it was in stomach, but alcohol is not absorbed here. Now let's talk about assimilation. What is assimilation? The absorbed substances finally reach to the tissues, which utilize them for different activities like exchange of gases, nutrients, etc. And this utilization of energy can be categorized as the assimilation. This is the process of assimilation in which the energy is utilized to do different body or biological functions in muscles and tissues. Now let's move to our last part, which is defecation. Defecation occurs in the last part of large intestine, which is rectum. In this, the digested waste solidifies into coherent feces in the rectum, initiate a neural reflex causing an urge or desire for its removal. It is carried out by peristaltic movement to ease the process. That was all about the absorption video. If you like this video, consider subscribing.